So I was thinking about love. I was thinking about how difficult it is for us to find and to maintain the love that we all yearn for. And it kind of dawned on me that I think a big part of the problem is that we misdefine love.
Right. So we have this ideal of what love is, and then these very, very unhelpful narratives of love, and they're in everywhere. You know, they're in movies and songs, and we mustn't blame songs and movies too much. But if you say to people, look, love is a painful, poignant, touching attempt by two flawed individuals to try and meet each other's needs in situations of gross uncertainty and ignorance about who they are and who the other person is, but, we're going to do our best. That's a much more generous starting point. So the acceptance of ourselves as flawed creatures seems to me what love really is. Love is at its most necessary when we are weak, when we feel incomplete, and we must show love to one another at those points. So we've got these.
So me and Jada was reflecting about love. You cannot make a person happy. You can make a person smile, you can make a person feel good, you can make a person laugh, but whether or not a person is happy is deeply and totally and utterly out of your control. The thing that...
Young man, why are you eating that fish? The young man says, because I love fish. He says, oh, you love the fish. That's why you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. He said, don't tell me you love the fish. You love yourself. And because the fish tastes good to you, therefore, you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. So much of what is love, right, is fish love, right? And so, young couple falls in love. Young man and young woman fall in love. What does that mean? That means that he saw in this woman someone who he felt could provide him with all of his physical and emotional needs. And she saw in this man somebody she feels that she can write. That was love, right? But each one is looking out for their own needs. Right? It's not love for the other. The other person becomes a vehicle for my gratification. Too much of what is called love is fish love. Right? An external love is not on what I'm going to get, but what I'm going to give. We had an ethicist, Rabbi Dessler, who said, people make a serious mistake in thinking that you give to those whom you love. And the real answer is, you love those to whom you give. Right? And his point is, if I give something to you, I've invested myself in you. Right? And since self-love is a given, everybody loves themselves, now that part of me has become in you, right, there's part of me in you that I love. Right? So, true love is a love of giving, not a love of receiving.
J. Krishnamurti talked about the concept of the desire-pleasure paradigm, that we think about love in terms of desire and pleasure, meaning that if you meet my needs, then I love you. If you don't, then I don't. So that love becomes transactional. If you do what I want, if you meet my desire and give me pleasure, I love you. If you don't meet my desire and you don't give me pleasure, I don't love you. I think that in the insatiable nature of desire, trying to get somebody to fill our cup, I think that leads to anger, and it leads to frustration, and ultimately it makes us break apart from people.
Psychoanalysis has taught us that when we fall in love with people, we're essentially recreating a pattern of earliest childhood, that we learn about love in the bosom of the family. And when it comes to adult love, we are mirroring very much on top of this ancient story, which is generally inaccessible to our conscious control. Now, the problem is that when we love in adulthood, we are not necessarily drawn to people who will make us happy. We are drawn to people who will feel familiar. And very often, happiness and familiarity have drifted apart because the love we knew as children is not a love that was pure of certain rather unhealthy or troublesome dynamics.
My daughter Willow really taught me a hard lesson. I think that the real paradigm for love is gardener-flower. So the relationship that a gardener has with a flower is the gardener wants the flower to be what the flower is designed to be, not what the gardener wants the flower to be. You want the flower to bloom and to blossom and to become what it wants to be. You want it to become what God designed it to be. You're not demanding that it become what you need it to be for your ego. Anything other than all of your gifts wide open, giving and nourishing this flower into their greatness is not love.
We'll make the case that limitation is necessary for being, and then we can make the case that tragedy is an inevitable consequence of limitation, and then we might say, well, is being worth the tragedy? And I think the answer yes to that is love, and the answer no to that is the opposite of love, because when you love someone, you love them in spite of or even because of their vulnerability. Not that you don't want them to transcend that, because you do, and I think that love is the acceptance of the price of being. It's the way you manifest your acceptance of the price of being, because if you love someone, they have their vulnerabilities like every human being, but your basic judgment is that despite the fact that they have these vulnerabilities that are even fatal and that are certainly tragic, that it's better that they were than that they weren't.
So love is really devotion to their struggle. It's when you're committed to helping somebody with their life, helping them to suffer less, helping them to manage their minds and their emotions. I think love is a deep desire for our loved ones' growth and their blossoming and their all-around well-being. When you love somebody, you want them to feel good, you want them to be happy, and you want to see them succeed in life. And love really demands an in-depth understanding of their hopes and their dreams and their fears, their needs and trauma. I think love is giving and sharing our gifts for the purpose of nurturing them and empowering them and helping them to create their greatest joys.
You cannot imitate this thing. There is no way of getting it, and yet it is absolutely essential that we have it. Because obviously, the human race is not going to flourish harmoniously unless we are enabled to love each other. But the question is, how do you get it? Is it something you simply have to contract like measles? Or is, as theologians say, is it a gift of divine grace, which somehow is dished out to some but not to others? And if there is no way of getting divine grace by anything you do, as the Calvinists aver, then we'd better just sit around and wait until something happens. Although Calvinists never did that. They were almost depressingly energetic. But surely we can't be left in that kind of a hopeless situation. There must be some way of getting the grace, or getting divine charity or love, some sort of wangle, some sort of way in which we can, as it were, open ourselves so as to become conduit pipes for the flow. And so the more subtle preachers try to see if we can open ourselves and teach methods of meditation and spiritual discipline in the hope that we can contact this power. The less subtle preachers simply say, you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough guts, you don't have enough willpower. If you only put your your shoulder to the wheel and shoved, you would be, of course, an exemplar and a saint.
If you learn to be loving by your own nature, not because of somebody else or something else, if you just become love, not love somebody, then you will know the nature of love. If you love somebody, it's a fickle happening, because no human being will happen 100% the way you want them. Every human being on this planet is going to disappoint you, believe me. Not because they'll do something wrong, because nobody can fulfill the unrealistic expectation you have of them. It's simply not possible. Have you been able to fulfill anybody's expectation, I'm asking you, entirely? Partially, but never entirely, isn't it? So nobody else will be able to do it. Unless you're still such a hopeless romantic, you're still waiting, that ideal person is going to come from somewhere. No, believe me, whoever comes, I want you to know, the ideal people whom you worship, when Krishna was there, his wives complained.
The ancient Greeks had a much wiser vision of love. The ancient Greeks believed that love is an attraction to perfection and virtue and accomplishment. Whenever we see virtue and accomplishment, we feel a sensation of love. We're tolerant towards the bad, the imperfect, the fragile, the vulnerable. We tolerate it and we're kind to it, but we don't love it. We just put up with it. But the real sensation of love is focused on perfection and accomplishment. Now, the romantic view is contrary to that. It says you should love the whole thing. There is no such thing as a weakness, a vulnerability. All these things are equally lovable, and education has no place in love. Now, the ancient Greeks believed that when you love someone, you are embarked on a process of mutual education. You're trying to educate them, and they're trying to educate you.
Now, how does one find out? Not if the energies are similar, but what love is. Is love pleasure, desire?
A very new idea was born in the middle of the 18th century that historians call romanticism. And we are all the heirs of romanticism. And the way that human beings love is very context and society dependent. You know, there's that lovely quote by La Rochefoucauld, there are some people who would never have fallen in love if they hadn't heard there was such a thing.